Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 513 for the 19th of August 2018. It's not the numerology podcast, although with all those numbers, Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia, coming off the back of 2 weeks of wonderful science at Science Week, which really lasted for 2 weeks. So on this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, lots from Science Week. However, we're going to kick off with an interview with Kate Browne. Now, Kate Browne, known to many Australians as the Gulty Mum from ABC's Checkout program, is also going to be the MC for this year's Skepticon in October here in Sydney in Chatswood. I caught up with Kate Browne a couple of days ago and she tells us all about her other work at Choice magazine and also about her time at the Checkout, consumer affairs and skepticism. Following that, it's part 2 of Maynard's spooky action at the Australian Museum, where Maynard was running around meeting and interviewing all sorts of scientists and interesting people. This week, Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, part 2, because there's never enough time with Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki. Part 2 of Maynard's interview of Dr. Karl, followed by an interview with Catherine Polcz, who was the program producer for the Sydney Science Festival. And next week, even more interviews from the launch of Science Week with Maynard. Following that, I chat to Alethea Dean from the Australian Skeptics, who's going to be filling us in on more details about the upcoming Skepticon in October. We have news of the possibility of a crèche and a sign language interpreter. And this is where we might be asking for your feedback and input. Then I head to the Powerhouse Museum, or it's also known as the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences here in Sydney, to speed meet the scientists. I found myself in a room full of scientists, all sitting at their desks, just waiting to be interviewed or to chat to the general public. So I chat to marine biologists and people involved with bees and ecologists and all sorts of people this week. And this is the first part of a series of these interviews. Next week, part 2, and the week after, part 3. There were just so many scientists to meet. Then to wrap up the show, a really interesting interview with our reporter Kevin Davies, based in Canberra. Now have a listen to this. Now, some of you out there probably knew what that said, that little bit of Morse code. Well, we're going to be finding out about a wonderful lady called, well, affectionately known as Mrs. Mac, who taught thousands of people Morse code. Now, before I listened to this interview myself, I knew SOS in Morse code, which a lot of people do. It's quite famous. But after listening to this interview, I now know a couple more letters in Morse code, and I won't forget them. It's really interesting. Maybe I should learn the whole alphabet. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have some caramel pudding. Thanks, Trish. My good friend Trish Han, who appears on the Skeptic Zone from time to time, is also my secret supplier of caramel pudding. Yes, I'm going to run downstairs, grab some of that quickly, come back and bring you the Skeptic Zone. I'm with Kate Browne, and Kate, you're going to be the MC for Skepticon.
It's true. I can't believe I'm being allowed let loose on the microphone for 2 days.
We're really looking forward to it. Now, for those people out there, especially in Australia, and they're thinking, Kate Browne, where do I know that name from? Where might people have seen you before?
I've popped up in a few places. I'm well known for being a consumer journalist. I work at Choice. I was also the artist formerly known as the Gulty Mum on the sadly now defunct TV show The Checkout. Sorry, it's not defunct. It's on hiatus, according to the ABC.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Well, let's look at Choice first. How long have you been with Choice magazine?
I've worked at Choice for over 10 years. I'm an editor there now. I'm fully immersed in the consumer world, but with a big dash of science, obviously. We love to test things at Choice. We love to get the real facts on things. That some of the areas I look at are things like food, the wellness industry, the diet industry, product safety, and just about anything else you can think of.
I like the fact you said the wellness industry, and it is an industry, isn't it?
The wellness industry is huge, and even with Choice readers, I'm surprised often if we present the facts on a particular product that's having its moment in the sun. We do get a lot of kickback from people, even if we provide all the evidence or the lack of evidence more commonly. And it is interesting how much people do latch on to things around wellness these days and really emotionally defend them.
And when you say kickback, of course, you mean flack.
I do. I don't mean I'm funded by the anti-wellness industry. Someone did actually accuse me once of being funded by, what was it? It made me laugh. The plant oil industry.
The plant oil industry.
I had written an article about coconut oil, which is apparently can cure anything, don't you know? Yeah. Yes, and and I suggested that things like olive oil or other oils were just as good, if not better. And a gentleman did write in and suggest that I was funded. I don't know if there is such an industry, but if there is, sadly, they're not putting any money in my pocket.
We're all funded by some nefarious big corporation. Didn't you know that? Or doesn't your check come yet?
I'm still waiting for my check.
But Choice Magazine, folks, we've had a long and happy relationship at the Skeptics with Choice Magazine. We've gone in there often to have a chat about this product or that product or more recently, I think, weird and strange devices. But this is exactly the sort of thing Choice Magazine have been looking at for years.
It is, and the area that I look after, we do look at health. So we do see a lot of interesting health products. Sadly, many of them appear in pharmacies, and of course, to most consumers, look completely legitimate. And even before I worked at Choice, I assumed anything in a pharmacy was legitimate. We've looked at things like magnet cures for back pain and muscular pain, the fabulous pain eraser, which we looked at last year at Choice, which is like kind of using one of those things you light your barbecue and putting it against your skin. Doesn't do much, but the pain eraser's, well over $50. So an interesting choice for pain relief. But yeah, look, these things are constantly growing another head and keep us pretty busy.
Yeah, and I think that did that win a Shonky Award last year, if I'm remembering correctly?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, and just for those listeners overseas, the Shonkies, it's like the Ben Spoon Award in the Australian Skeptics. It's the award you don't want to get from Choice Magazine.
It's true. The winners never show up, sadly, Richard. Not once. And many of the winners have included large banking corporations, other corporates, large food manufacturers. They never turn up. It's very sad.
It's very sad. Now, this does tie in with the work in the checkout, of course. And I remember when the checkout started, just before it started, I went to the ABC and I interviewed Chaz, I think. And he was still one of the producers, right?
Yes. Yeah, Chaz did a lot of script editing, behind-the-scenes work. You can play Spot the Chaz too. He often pops up in some of the segments.
I must have a look at some of the I would say, repeats. But the good thing is, and what I really love, many things about the checkout, it's a favourite show of the Skeptics, of course, but so much of it is simply freely available on YouTube, and I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, look, I think with the show it was a great approach. They released every episode on YouTube. They also put each segment on YouTube, which I think is really clever. There's nothing more annoying than having to scroll through 30 minutes of a show trying to find that segment that you like that pertain to your interests. And I thought that was a great way of making that information accessible, but really shareable. So even the dreaded Gulty Mum has her own channel with every single episode separately listed. And I think that's what has given the show so much scope in terms of viewers. When the show was put on a hiatus recently, it was interesting to see that quite a few people from overseas had been watching it in the States and in Canada. And even though they were saying, look, our laws are different, I could take a lot of the principles, because a lot of them are just common sense, and apply them to our own situations. So I think, it was a really fantastic public service. It's a great way to give people information that's memorable by telling a story, making a joke, and it really resonated with younger people as well. And so I think, as sad as it is that it's on hiatus or possibly axed, that great information lives on YouTube.
It certainly does. Now, folks, in this week's show notes, I shall link directly to the Gulty Mum channel. Is it called the Gulty Mum or As a Gulty Mum?
As a Gulty Mum.
As a Gulty Mum. Oh, even when you say it now, I'm...
I'm definitely not one in my own life, but I'm more of a slack mum. But yes, it's As a Gulty Mum. She does have her own channel, and there's some other great consumer info on there. They've done some great work on pharmacy, some of those great pharmacy products
they
too.
Certainly have.
In fact, that you'll see Chaz in that. There was a great one about cold and flu medication. Chaz had a cameo dressed as a giant nose.
Oh, that was him. Right.
Yes, a very cranky nose. So watch that one. But hop on and have a look.
Certainly. Well, again, folks, link in this week's show notes. And I'll tell you, a very good friend of ours in the skeptical world, Michael Marshall, who is in the Good Thinking Society in the UK, I would sometimes send him a link to something from the checkout, and he'd write back hours and hours later, said, I've just spent the last 6 hours watching the checkout. It's quite addictive. So congratulations, by the way, on all that work.
Thank you.
And I think you came across as your character very well. It was you did it with such style and a hint of cheekiness and humour, and I thought it was very enjoyable.
Oh, thank you. It was brave of Julian and Craig to give me a go. I'd never been let loose on a camera before, so maybe it was good therapy after being a parent myself. But yeah, it was a great show to work on, and for me, like, a great way to see that consumer affairs doesn't have to be boring, and fact, evidence-based stuff doesn't have to be boring. You can, it's how you tell the story.
So we are very excited and very much looking forward to the fact that you're emceeing our Skepticon in October. How are you feeling about that? Are you sort of taking a big breath, or what do you expect?
Oh, look, I know Lawrence Long did it last year, and he's very good with the Rubik's Cube. I don't think I have any talents to rival that. I do have a very loud voice, and I am quite bossy being a parent. So, I'll be keeping people in line. I'm really excited to, I'm also really excited to be privy to the whole 2 days, because we've got an amazing lineup, and I'm really looking forward to it. I loved it last year, and I think this year looks even better again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, folks. Yet another reason, my goodness me, to come to Australian Skeptics National Convention, Skepticon, and you can meet the Gulty Mum in person. Well, Kate, thank you very much.
Thank you. See you soon.
Quackwatch, your guide to quackery, health fraud, and intelligent decisions, operated by Stephen Barrett, MD. Quackwatch is now an international network of people who are concerned about health-related frauds, myths, fads, fallacies, and misconduct. Its primary focus is on quackery-related information that is difficult or impossible to get elsewhere. Articles on quackery include quackery. How should it be defined? How it sells. 26 ways to spot it. How it harms cancer patients. 7 warning signs for bogus science. Why health professionals become quacks. And many more, including in-depth looks at acupuncture, chiropractic, homeopathy, naturopathy, and much more. Visit www.quackwatch.com.
Here's Maynard's spooky action. at a distance.
Karl, I just love hearing about your travels. You're going to be at the Skeptics convention. You're going to be there for that one?
Yes, gigging away happily. First cab off the rank, I think, with a brand new show.
And look, Karl, since I've met you many, many years ago, the world has changed a lot, and the place of science is certainly very different, and the way science is regarded seems to be under threat at the moment. Do you feel that or not?
There's the rise of fake news, but there's always been fake news going all the way back to the Great Fire of London and even earlier with the Great Fire of Rome. So,
because they always try and blame a group of people that they don't like as starting it. That's always one they always bring up.
Yeah, so science has a disadvantage, which is that it in some cases can be absolutely true, and some people don't like this for various reasons. So with regard to global warming, what we have is a situation that out of a world gross domestic product of about $90 or so billion, the fossil fuel companies get subsidies of about $5 and a bit trillion a year, or 6.25% of the world's gross domestic product. So every single dollar that is earned, the fossil fuel companies on average around the world get 6.25 cents. Question, when was the last time you saw a fossil fuel company being broke and trying to have a Lamington sale at the local primary school on a Saturday morning to raise some money? So the question is, why do the fossil fuel companies get so much money on top of the profits while they're destroying our environment? It seems that they must have friends in high places. In Australia, the latest data we have goes back to 2015, and the amount of money paid as subsidies, free money, to the fossil fuel companies is 2% of our GDP. It's more than the military get. It works out to, in 2015 dollars, $1,260 that every Australian citizen, baby to grandparent, pays to the fossil fuel companies on top of their massive profits and the fact that they're destroying the environment.
Because they can just buy what they want, really. They've bought the politicians?
Well, the answer to that is that you should become a politician. I actually found, on my visit to China, the original poster where Mao Zedong said, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. I've got that poster.
Wow.
Right? It's a propaganda poster in Shanghai. So in Australia and most of the Western world, political power grows out of the politics, out of the parliament. So everybody, like I did, run for politics. Or if you can't, support somebody who will. Because you can have influence, but you don't have power until you can write a law. So everybody, get into politics, and that way the world will be a better place. It's a hard run. And one of the things that they do, like, do you remember many years ago, John Howard spent a lot of time walking around the then Prime Minister of Australia in various pastel coloured jumpsuits on the...
Yes, he did. Yeah.
You remember that, yeah. Do you know what else he did that year?
What?
No, what he did was he spent 2/3 of Australia's GDP on submarines that could not work, the Collins-class submarines.
Because they were going to make local jobs in Adelaide or something like that, wasn't it? Yeah.
And making a world-class submarine is not a trivial task, and we failed. And as a result, the way that he used to convince people not to get into politics was by wearing pastel jumpsuits. The best thing the politicians have done to us is so that when I say, hey, Maynard, why don't you run for politics? And automatically, as a reflex, without even thinking about it, you're saying, oh, God, no, they're all crooks. And you're missing the point that if you go in, there'll be an honest person who cares about our children and their children. So this is my lesson for Australians. Run for politics or support people who do, so you get good people in there passing laws that we like.
Well, see, the thing that I would imagine would be a challenge, particularly for a rational person like yourself, Karl, is that politics is the art of compromise, because you can't always get what you want. You have to compromise. And how do you compromise facts?
You can't, and so that's why you just go in there and be yourself and be honest and be yourself and just let whatever's on your mind float out. Donald Trump lets everything in his mind float out, and that's been an interesting lesson.
It is. It's almost like, I don't like what he does, but the fact that he appears to be keeping promises from his election that you don't, they normally throw him away. And it's like he's got a list he's going through, like Gough Whitlam used to.
Well, whenever I see him on TV, I get the mental impression that I'm watching a kid in Year 5 at a primary school giving a report on a book that he hasn't read. Marvellous, fantastic, great, yes. Whole lot of really soft words, nothing specific.
And Dr. Karl, where can we catch you online where we can see what you're up to?
drkarl.com, drkarl.com. We'll have all of my shows. And also, just a freebie, I'm very happy to do free science Q&As with schools anywhere in Australia, around the world. Just go to drkarl.com and see the bit that says teachers want a free science Q&A session with your class. Costs you nothing.
Yeah, and you'll fit it into your schedule because you're travelling around anyway, maybe. You never know.
I use this wonderful invention called the interwebs.
Oh, that one. Oh, that thing.
That thing, yeah.
Right.
And
so that's what Skype's for, I wondered.
Yeah, well, I keep on coming across people who don't know the difference between these three things: Wi-Fi, the internet, and the World Wide Web. It takes about 10 minutes to educate them, and then they're very happy.
Thank you, Karl. Great talking to you again.
Thank you, Dr. Maynard.
Yes, the music is pumping here. And, of course, what would science be without the great early work of some pioneers of much of the evolutionary science that Darwin followed? Of course, that was Karl and the gang. Karl, of course, studied at the University of Edinburgh. The gang studied at the University of Brooklyn. They had tough times, but look, this is what they worked out. It's all right. Ah, yes, you love science. Oh. Hang on, I didn't have a chance to drop my big word. I've got a big science word to drop on you.
Yeah.
Epigenetics. What do you know about that, Karl?
Lots.
Wow, okay. Is it a real thing in humans or not?
Yes. So the best example of epigenetics is the Dutch hunger winter.
All right, yes.
So at the end of the Second World War, the Allies were pushing across towards Holland, having successfully reinvaded Europe. They were trying to get to a bridge at Arnhem, as in Arnhem Land. It's named after that. And in preparation for their getting there, the Dutch people rose up against their Nazi oppressors. However, the Americans and the Allies couldn't get there in time. The Dutch were then persecuted by their Nazi oppressors and then starved during what was turning out to be an especially nasty winter. As you would expect, many people died. As you would expect, pregnant women would give birth to smaller babies. Totally expected, but tragic, but expected. What was the big surprise was that when those babies grew up, they then gave birth to smaller babies, who in turn gave birth to smaller babies. So that's epigenetics. Epi means around, genetics is genetics. So you don't change the DNA, but you put little markers on it, around it, so you don't read bits of it. It's as though you've got a draft plan for a building and you just leave out a floor or you leave out the doors. So epigenetics is how there are changes that happen around the DNA that change how it's expressed. So, for example...
So that was just natural selection saying there's not a lot of food around, so let's not have big babies for a while.
Yeah. So in bees, all the bees are identical when they come out of the mother, but depending on what they're fed, half a dozen will turn into queens that are fertile females. And then the rest, depending on what they're fed, will mostly turn into sterile females, and a very small number, maybe 1,000, will turn into fertile males.
Wow.
And that's all due to epigenetics.
There you go. So it's a real thing. Richard, I wasn't having you on.
I don't believe it.
Yes, and of course, who can forget the early work and the later work of Dr. Deborah Harry, of course, who went to the University of Studio 56. Well, the University of Studio 54, actually. Heart of glass, early transplantation work. Unfortunately, glass was not exactly a great idea for a transplant. Look, we've tried to find a bit of a hushed area here because it's a very, very crowded room at the Australian Museum. But I'm here with the producer of Science Week. Is that your correct title?
I'm producer of the Sydney Science Festival, so at the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences.
Wow, now that's a lot of pressure. How are you handling it?
No, it's great. It's a busy time of year for us, but also the most fun time of year. Everything is culminating in this week. So
now, what is different about this year's Science Festival to ones you've been a part of or seen in the past?
Yeah, so it's at the 4th year of the festival. It's actually the biggest festival yet. Wow. So we have more partners and more events than we've ever had before. So that's really exciting. this year we've engaged with libraries throughout Sydney, so we have a lot more community events all throughout the city. We co-produce the festival with Australian Museum, so that's been a big change too, and it's been really amazing.
So is your background in event organisation, or you've got a science background as well?
So actually my background's in botany.
Botany?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favourite flower? What's your favourite plant? Come on, everyone's got their own.
So I'm a Canadian botanist. My favourite plant is called hog peanut in the Fabaceae bean family.
Wow. And why that one?
I don't get asked that enough.
I know. Well,
thank you.
Why that one? Does it look good? Does it do something special? Is it weird?
It just looks amazing. And if you're looking at plants a lot, there's some that speak to you in different ways, and there's some that just seem humorous or friendly, and I just always smile and love it when I see it.
Hey, I have to ask you, in the Canadian botany world, do you have any carnivorous plants like the Venus flytrap or the Western Australian pitcher plant? Do you have plants that eat flies or stuff?
We sure do.
What do you got?
We have sundew, so plants in the Drosera family. We have a lot of bogs in Canada, low, very acidic environments, not much drainage in the Canadian Shield. I never get to talk about this.
That's true.
We also have pitcher plants, so Sarracenias.
Maybe you can help me, because they're very difficult to grow at home because you can't get that bog environment in your garden easily, can you? Is it impossible to do?
I've killed all of the ones I've tried to grow myself.
That makes me feel better, because you're a professional and you couldn't do it. Yeah, because the soil is so difficult to match.
It's hard, yeah.
And so
you need rainwater, not tap water.
Well, look, congratulations on it once again, and I hope it's going to be great. And thank you for letting us know your favourite plant. Now, what is it again, so we can go look it up?
Hog peanut.
Wow. And
I think Amphicarpum bracteatum.
Wow. And what website can we find your stuff on?
sydneyscience.com.au.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Yvette D'Entremont, aka SciBabe, and I debunk bad science for a living. This includes health, nutrition, and general BS on the internet. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all at Skepticon in Australia this October.
We're in the cafe Madame Frou Frou in Glebe. This is a popular hangout from Maynard, actually. I wonder if I can see him. He might be here later on. I'm here with Alethea Dean. Hello, Alethea.
G'day, Richard.
Lovely to catch up with you. Now, you're one of the organisers for the upcoming Skepticon. I bet that's a busy time for you, an exciting time.
Both exciting and very nerve-wracking. I really hope we've got a great lineup that people are really going to enjoy. I know I'm excited about it. We're just waiting for the convention to roll around in October.
Yeah, and just over a coffee we were chatting the panel I'm taking part in, which is the good old-fashioned skepticism, the ghosties and the paranormal and the spoon bending and the UFOs and things like that. And the exciting news is Lynn Kelly will be joining that panel, and that's fantastic. She wrote a book many years ago called, what was it called? The Skeptic's Guide to the Paranormal or something like that. So it's going to be a great lineup. Carrie Poppy's joining us, Beth Darlington, all sorts of people.
Yes, so Richard's panel is going to be talking about the real classic subjects of skepticism, like cold reading and yowie hunting and ghosts. Do ghosts exist? Find out.
Now that's going to be a fascinating panel, and I think it'll please a lot of people who remember the good old days of the Australian Skeptics. Not that these aren't good old days too, but I'm talking about the wonderful investigations into UFOs and monsters and spoon bending and things like that.
Yeah, there's a sense of the retro here, which I think is a bit of fun. Bit of fun for everyone.
And who else do we have coming along? I mean, I can think of people like Dr. Karl.
Yep, Dr. Karl is someone who's been very supportive of the Skeptics over the years. We're so excited to have him again as our opener. And we're also going to be seeing Pamela Gay of the astronomy cast. as I refer to her, the most beautiful voice in podcasting. Sorry, Richard.
Oh dear, I'm crestfallen now.
And we've also got Cybabe, who's been very critical of the way I think some social media influencers use fake science to promote nutrition. And who else? Alan Duffy, Professor Alan Duffy, who's going to be talking with Pamela Gay about space and the stars. And it's going to be amazing.
It really is. It really is. And any time is a good time to get your tickets at convention.skeptics.com.au. And we hope to offer attendees some very special services, don't we?
Yeah, this year we're really looking to make the event as accessible as possible. And one of the things that we've been looking into is providing a crèche for families who might otherwise find it difficult to attend. We've been talking to the venue about providing a nursing room. And we've also been talking about providing Australian Sign Language interpretation services. If any of your listeners, Richard, would be interested in accessing these services or have any other questions, we really encourage them to contact us either via the website or by calling in to the number at the Australian Skeptics website. Let us know if this is something that you're interested in or if you have friends or family members who might need these services, and we can definitely look at making it easier for you to attend. And that's on top of the Chatswood Concourse having some really great accessibility themselves for people with mobility issues and hearing issues.
Absolutely right. And I think a crèche is a wonderful idea. I can't recall seeing one at a convention before here or the States where I've been to, having a child-minding facility. And for those parents out there who do find it difficult to get out because they have to look after little ones, I think it's a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, so let us know if this is something you need or want.
And mentioning Chatswood, of course, and again, we were just chatting about it before the interview, Chatswood's got to be one of the most amazing areas for dining. You can get any food there your imagination desires. I mean, multicultural cuisine everywhere you look, isn't it?
Chatswood really is a gem of Sydney's multiculturalism, and there's regional cuisine from all over Asia. You could eat from a different region of China every day, and I'm getting hungry just even talking about it right now.
And it'll all be there. So, folks, there's the clue once again. Convention.skeptics.com.au. Check it out, see who's coming along, check out all the speakers. And, yeah, if you're interested in the crèche service, or maybe you'd like some help with the sign language, please let us know. Let us know and we'll know if we're on the right track. Well, Alethea, we've still got a lot of work to do before the convention rolls around, but it's all looking very exciting.
Yep, see how much I can pawn off to you, Richard.
Hey, Richard.
Oh, hi, Trish. Hi. Would you like a coffee?
Yeah, thanks. What are you working on?
I'm trying to come up with a new promo to play on the Skeptic Zone.
Who's it for?
The Good Thinking Society in the UK. You know, Michael Marshall, Simon Singh, Laura Thomas and that crowd.
Oh, yeah, I know them. Oh. They've been doing some great work investigating veterinary homeopathy.
Veterinary homeopathy? What, you sugar pills for cows?
I know, right? And also they're looking at some of the dodgy medical advice given by UK chiropractors.
Really? Okay, look, I'll mention all that in the promo. Now, their website is goodthinkingsociety.org.
And they've recently been reporting on the resurgence of faith healer Peter Popov.
Peter Popov, great. Okay, look, thanks for that. It gives me something good to think about. I'm just walking into the Powerhouse Museum here in Sydney, where tonight they have a Speed Meet the Scientist night, a room full of scientists You can sit down and have a chat to many people covering many aspects of science, many disciplines. And there are so many, in fact, that I think this will be a series of interviews over the next couple of weeks. But if I make my way down this escalator, around the corner, there's people milling about already, and I'll head for the Room of Scientists for part 1 of Speed Meet the Scientists.
It might be a situation.
It's Meet the Scientist night here at the Powerhouse Museum. It's my first table, first scientist. I've just come in before the crowds head your way. Hello, who do we have here?
Hello, I'm Camilla Hoyos.
And what's your... Oh, a creaky table. Apart from the creaky table, what's your area?
Sleep. So I'm interested in how sleep affects our health and how we can improve sleep to also try and ward off health conditions.
I think a lot of my audience would be very interested. I'll tell you something that I've found over the years that helps me sleep, and you've probably heard this before, is just listening to podcasts or something in your ears. Is that similar to listening to the ocean or the rain on the roof, do you think?
I guess it could be. So what we know is listening can help because watching something often can stop us from falling asleep, and having light near us, because that is alerting and can stop our normal rhythms from telling us how to go to sleep. And so I guess it's very individual. So some people might find listening to something alerting again, or it might bring out something, I guess, but other people would find it soothing. And, and a lot of people do find that you can get machines and stuff. I guess it's very individual and personal, that if you like to hear something that's repetitive, or if you like to listen to something, but if you're listening and making an effort to listen, then for some people, maybe that would mean that you wouldn't fall asleep as easily.
That's why so many people fall asleep listening to my show, because they're probably not listening. I'm sure they'll be listening intently to what you have to say. But the rain on the roof is a classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a lullaby in a way.
Yeah, and I guess the ocean, and I like that, but not everyone will, I guess. It's, different.
And what's the biggest problem you've come across in your research with people trying to get a good night's sleep?
So what I look at is sleep disorders.
I see, right, specific disorders.
Yes.
Yeah.
So mostly sleep apnea. So we know sleep apnea is very common, and it results in people having fragmented or disrupted sleep, because when they start to get into deep sleep, they can stop to breathe. So they can stop, and then their body has to wake them up. And so even though they might not know that they're waking up, they're kind of going to sleep and waking up and going to sleep and waking up. So these can be, mean that they're sleeping the same amount of time, but they're not having a nice consolidated sleep. And so what we're interested in is how this affects health outcomes. And there's a lot of research out there to show that people can be obviously sleepy the next day, and it can affect alertness and function. But there's been a lot of research into if it can affect our body and our health. And so we've previously looked at its links with conditions like obesity and diabetes. And now I'm more in the area of healthy brain aging and cognitive impairment.
Wow. You're blowing my mind, and I think I'd better go and have a good night's sleep after that. And if people want to find out more about what you do, are you online? Or do you work online?
Yes, I'm at the University of Sydney, but also at the Woolcock Institute of Medical Research. Oh, yes. So we have a big sleep group there, and also a sleep clinic.
A big sleep group. I could just picture it now. Lots of beds, and everyone just crashes there, right?
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, there I was, walking past all the scientists, minding my own business, when a bee appeared. Oh, it's made out of what? Pipe cleaners and all sorts of things.
An electric toothbrush, pipe cleaners, some modelling clay, some recycled fabrics, and it is a blue-banded bee, which are buzz pollinators who can vibrate their head at 350 times per second in order to shake the pollen out of plants. How cool is that?
Good grief. And who do we have here, by the way?
My name is Emily Vanderstock. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Sydney, and I'm researching the role of native bees in urban places.
And what's the big difference between native bee And maybe the bee we see every day, which is not native, am I right?
Yeah, so we have over 1,700 species of native bees.
No, really?
Yeah, and that's the ones that we know of. There's probably so many more. So all these budding ecologists out there, if you just keep looking around for bees and learn some taxonomy, you might be able to name your own species. But the honeybee is just one species that is actually an introduced species in Australia.
It's the one that people would know as the classic bee. Do native bees make their own honey? I guess they do.
Yeah, so some native bees do make honey. In Sydney, we have a stingless bee called the Tetragonula carbonaria. And
you say that so well.
I kind of think of them like a pterodactyl in a carbonara pasta. So that's one way to remember them. And they do make honey. They make this beautiful lemony honey. And they also have these amazing spiral-shaped hives.
And do the bee that we know, that is European, is that right?
Yeah, the European honeybee, or Apis mellifera is its science name.
Yeah, to its friends, right? Yes.
Yeah, just to its mates.
And how, has that been a huge disruption to the local bees, or they all get on famously?
Well, so the introduced honeybees have been here for a very long time now. And recent research shows that generally, so long as there's enough flowers and enough of the food source and habitat for all the bees to share, that they're not really competing too much. So if there's enough flowers and resources, all the bees can live in harmony. But if there's not enough, so if we keep, with habitat destruction and development and not providing enough green spaces, that's when we might be seeing some competitive things happening. But this is all like research that's happening at the moment, so watch that space.
Cutting edge research about bees. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting. I shall look up Australian bees.
Yeah, and definitely check out the blue-banded bee. 350 buzzes per second.
And there it is, buzzing,
Pretty
folks.
Amazing. Beautiful native bee.
And if people want to find out more about your particular research, are you online anywhere?
Yes, you can go to crosspollinating.org. And it's about cross-pollinating community ecology, citizen science, native bees in the city.
I love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I've come to another table, and who do we have here?
I'm Alex Thompson from Deep Green Biotech Hub at UTS.
And what's your area, why are you here, and what do you want to tell people?
So I am first and foremost a marine ecologist, but what I am doing now is looking at algae biotech and how we can use algae biotech to change the face of a whole bunch of industries.
How so?
So algae, more specifically microalgae, is this really amazing organism that we can pull proteins and fats and all sorts of sugars and stuff out of and use it to make things like plastics, use it for things in agriculture and aquaculture. We can use it to make pharmaceuticals, vaccinations, nutraceuticals. So I manage this Deep Green Biotech Hub, which we are basically kind of promoting algae as the next frontier across a bunch of different industries and helping to educate and engage with people about just how amazing it is.
And what led you to this branch of research? It's what should I say? It's not exactly obscure, but it's a little unusual.
So as I said, I did my PhD in marine ecology, and I did it within a research institute that had a really diverse and amazing group of researchers that were researching everything from like seafood safety to corals to really hardcore sort of biotech type things. And the research institute came up with an opportunity that was presented by Department of Industry to create this algae biotech hub. And I was there and just saw it as an amazing opportunity. Not only, this is kind of a scientist's dream, it's taking something that's sustainable and biological and showing it to people and saying, look at this amazing thing, look what it can do, and, really potentially having a massive impact on things around us.
And what has taken you by surprise in your research? Anything in particular?
I just think the diverse range of applications that something like this can have. I think that we are really at the forefront, and there is massive potential for so many things to change because of this. We're wanting to make our world more sustainable, we're wanting to make industries more sustainable, and this presents such an opportunity across such a wide range of industries and spaces. And I don't think we've ever seen something like this before.
And you can eat it.
And you can eat it, absolutely.
That's absolutely fascinating. Well, thank you very much, and all the best with your research.
Thank you.
Speed Meter Geek in 2006.
Frankie Lee, hello.
Hello, Richard Saunders. How are you going? You geeked out.
I've just been meeting every scientist. Well, I've still got some more to go, I think, but so many fascinating people. Now, you're really responsible for putting this wonderful Speed Meet the Scientist night together.
I am, yeah. I've been doing this since... We did the first one in 2006 at the Ultimo Science Festival at ABC. And it's happened every year since then. What year is it? So that's 12 years.
What year is it? Yes, yeah. I know. It's been one of those nights.
Years. Yeah. So,
but we all must say, too, I mean, this is at the Powerhouse Museum and other areas are open and there's lots of people sort of mingling, but they do find their way here to the room of scientists, and we look around now and there are tables set up everywhere. And there are more and more people coming, sitting with the scientist, having a chat, learning all sorts of things. It's a really great initiative. And I wouldn't be surprised, Frankie, if this is copied all around the world.
Well, I think it has taken off. You hear about people doing this and they think it's just a normal thing to do now. So it used to be kind of an unusual idea. And usually once the place is filled with customers talking to the scientists, you can't stop them. In fact, I try to ring the bell and get them to move on. You can't get them. They just all want to just chat. The scientists won't stop to eat or drink. We're thinking of getting like glucose intravenous drips for them to keep them going for the 3 hours.
It's a wonderful thing, Frankie. It's a great sign. Well, you know what? I'm going to dive in and see if I can't chat to a few more. And we're still keeping with the marine theme here. And who do we have?
My name's Karl, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Sydney.
And why are you here? What do you want to talk to people about?
I want to talk to people about crustaceans and why taxonomy and systematics is important for conservation, and how we can use fossils and biogeographical events to determine how old these groups are.
That's interesting, because right in front of me on the desk here we have... Oh, its head fell off. I think I've broken your crustacean. What is that one I'm looking at there?
So this is a mantis shrimp. So
that does come off. Right?
Yes. So it's a malacostracan crustacean. So they contain your crabs and your decapods. So it's a specific group within crustacean known as the higher crustaceans. And these guys are stomatopods. And you probably heard of them on David Attenborough. These are the guys that you sort of don't want to keep in aquariums and you don't want to get too close to, because they have a strike on using these appendages here, which exhibits a force similar to that of a .22 caliber bullet. So they'll break glass.
Now you've mentioned it. Yes, I've seen the videos of these little creatures unleashing an incredible punch, isn't it?
Yes, it's incredible, and they're very small, and they have this cavitation bubble, and it's enormously fast. It's actually, they hold the record for the fastest punch in the animal kingdom. It's insanely fast, and you don't want them to hit you, because the bigger species, they can actually break your finger. So, yes, I have a pet at home. Unfortunately, she's not too big, but she has nipped me a couple of times, and it's definitely scary, yeah.
Wow. And no, it's great, because right in front of me here you have other things on the table. Big, wonderful colour photograph and a little diagram here of other little creatures. But I love the little model here. That looks fantastic. That's life size, is it?
There are species that are about that size. So they range from about a centimetre to over 30 centimetres. So it's quite a broad spectrum, actually, of size. Yeah.
Well, all the best, and don't get punched out too often, huh?
Yes, that's very true. Don't want to run into one in a dark alley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was part one of Speed Meet the Scientists at the Powerhouse Museum, part of Science Week. Tune in next week to the Skeptic Zone for part 2.
This is Kyle from the Data Skeptic podcast. If you're curious about the way data is changing our world, topics like AI and all this craziness with Facebook and bots and the Twitter storm and how the algorithms that underline that work, and you don't want a technical deep dive, you want it in the vernacular, in a way that people can understand, check us out at Data Skeptic. That's what we try and do. I interview advanced professionals in the field who do this sort of research, and then I get into interesting projects as well. We're a weekly show, and you can find us at dataskeptic.com.
Hi, this is Kevin Davies from Canberra Skeptics, and I am here today with David Dufty. Well, first of all, Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a writer. Last year I had a book come out called The Secret Code Breakers of Central Bureau, which was basically a history of Australian code breaking and signals intelligence in the Second World War. Currently I'm writing a book on a very, sort of a tangential topic to that one, on a woman called Florence Mackenzie.
So who was Florence Mackenzie, or Mrs. Mac?
Mrs. Mac is how they all referred to her. So she was a pretty amazing person in that she was Australia's first female electrical engineer. She got her diploma in 1923, and when war broke out when the Second World War started, she was still Australia's only female electrical engineer. So she's historically significant on that alone. She also was very involved in the early radio industry and getting radio and wireless up and running in Australia. She founded a magazine called Wireless Weekly, which turned into a publishing juggernaut. She was an inventor. She was a poet. She started a shop called the Wireless Shop, which turned into an enormous retail business. Ended up getting bought out by, I think, Radio Shack or something like that. That might not be right, but anyway, so she did a lot of amazing things, but her biggest life accomplishment was really during the Second World War. She trained thousands of women and men in Morse code and signals. Back then, Morse code was a very big part of the sort of communications infrastructure of the country. Yes. It's not now, but it was then. And she saw that war was probably going to happen and thought, you know what, they're going to run out of people who can do this stuff. And not just Morse, but all sorts of signalling and telegraphy skills. So she just, off her own back, didn't ask for permission, no government money, nothing, just started a school in Sydney. Anybody who wants to come along and learn Morse code, come along. And so she got all these women coming along and learning Morse code. And so then, sure enough, she was right, and the military ran out of people who signals people, and they were appealing to the public. And so she went to the government, and she said, "I've trained 2,000 women in this stuff up to the standards required by the military. Do you want them?" Oh, and they said no at first. so she eventually persuaded the Navy to take them, but she was responsible for getting women into the Navy, and she's much beloved by all the people that went through her signals school. For people listening, the connection with Central Bureau, which was a code-breaking and signals intelligence operation, was that many of the women that Mrs. Mac trained ended up going into intelligence operations in Australia and working for intelligence organisations because of their skills with wireless and Morse. So that's the connection, and that's actually how I discovered her. I was writing this book on Australian code breakers, and she wasn't really part of the code breaking story. She's sort of tangential to that. Anyway, there was so much interest in that chapter in my book, more than so I think the code breakers, so I thought she deserves her own book. Yeah, I mean, she had all these innovative techniques for training people, and she used music to teach people, so she'd have the Teddy Bears Picnic playing, and so they'd be all tapping their Morse keys to the Teddy Bears Picnic. She had all these cute little funny rhymes that she'd have to teach people Morse code.
You want to talk about some of those rhymes?
Oh, yeah, sure. And it's actually been fun meeting people who trained with her and trying to piece together. I don't know if there's a complete alphabet of Mrs. Mac mnemonics, but I like to think there is. I'm tracking down all the different letters of the alphabet. So, for instance, in Morse code, which is basically just dots and dashes, the letter Q goes da da di, da, and so all these young women are trying to learn that, and so she'd say it sounds like "Here comes the bride." So the Q is "Here comes the bride." The letter V. Da. She said, "Oh, well, that's music as well. That's just because V looks like the Roman numeral letter for 5. That's Beethoven's 5th. Da 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 da." And so, if you're learning Morse, you're never going to forget V being da 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 da. Beethoven's 5th, the letter V. So these are some of the things she did. She had a lot of interesting tricks for teaching people, and I think she's actually really one of Australia's great teachers, period. A real innovator in terms of training and teaching.
What else did she do? You mentioned quite a few other activities. What did she do, say, after the war?
Okay, firstly, during the war, her signals school just got bigger and bigger. So, she trained these women, And then the Navy said, yes, we'd like the women, and then the Air Force. And then they realised they didn't have anybody to train the men going into like signals units and so forth. So, and for the Air Force. So her women that she trained, they all just work, office workers in Sydney, these young women, or even just late teens and early 20s. They ended up training all the men, all the recruits for the Australian Air Force, the Navy. 10,000 men they trained, these women. And then, but then after the war, the whole thing wound down, and then all these veterans started coming back and they didn't have jobs. So she started training some of the men she trained before, guys who'd learned all these skills in the Air Force, to become commercial pilots, and training them to become merchant sailors and stuff like this, because they still needed to learn all of the skills involved in signals. So she did that until about 1952. So she did that for a number of years and then she retired.
You said you'd met some people who knew her. What were their overall descriptions of her?
Well, it's funny. So there's a few things that everybody seems to say. She was lovely, she was amazing, and she was very, very short. I don't know why. They always mention that. So it's been good. So I'd only found 4 people who knew her in person at various times. One was a distant relative, and just different people who'd actually met her in some way. I've actually discovered many other people who knew her and were trained by her, and it's been just really great meeting them and hearing their story about her.
Wow, that's a really impressive story. If any of our listeners want to get in contact with you, how can you be reached?
Oh, by email, I guess, is the simplest thing, daviddufty@gmail.com. That's DAVIDDUFTY, no dots or anything, at gmail.com. And it's DUFTY. A lot of people with Duffy my name's Duffy. Yeah, so you can email me. I'd love to hear from you if you know anything about Mrs. Mack or signals training in the Second World War or anything like that. Or if you've got any amazing stories about code breaking in the Second World War as well, I'd love to hear from you.
I know there are. Well, David Dufty, thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Next week, even more scientists, speed meeting, and Maynard chats to lots of other scientists as well. More scientists than you can poke a test tube at. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know. And speaking of more scientists than you can poke a test tube at, you'll be meeting lots of those people and all sorts of skeptics and doctors at the Australian Skeptics National Convention, Skepticon, coming up later in the year, or very soon. We keep saying later in the year, but actually it's very soon now. And if you haven't bought your tickets yet, now's the time to do it. It helps with numbers and planning and organising and all sorts of things. I went to the venue with Alethea Dean just a few days ago. Alethea, Maynard and I went there to make a promotional video, and it's superb, the concourse at Chatswood. Now I'm very excited to tell you that coming up on next week's show, we have an interview with Stephen Barrett, the man behind Quackwatch, quackwatch.org. Now you'll hear promotions. In fact, on this week's episode, you heard a promotion for Quackwatch. I've been visiting this site for years to find out information about homeopathy, chiropractic, acupuncture, and on and on and on. So I am delighted and honoured to bring you next week an interview with Stephen Barrett. Thank you to those people who contribute to the Skeptic Zone via PayPal or Patreon. I'm getting so much use out of the new microphone, the Yellowtech IXM, and I can only do that because of the generous and kind contributions from Skeptic Zone listeners. And also, just lately, I'm able to help Maynard out with some new bits and pieces and equipment, and that's all very much appreciated. And I hope it helps to bring you a better Skeptic Zone. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter @Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello, you people who listen after the music. We'll have to give you a special name, I think. All right, here we go again. Predict a number from 1 to 1,000. Use your psychic powers. Skeptic Zone listeners having psychic powers. Okay, here we go. Have you predicted your number from 1 to 1,000? The number is, I'm going to rattle my 10-sided die here, 300 and 8. 308. All those people who predicted 308, well done. Why don't you run down to the kitchen and have some caramel pudding?